Please join me in welcoming Mr. Stephen Waguespack.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you for the invite to be here today. And thank you for the hard work for all the DEMCO employees that have been busting their tail over the last week or so trying to get everyone back on. I know that's not easy sledding, especially in unfamiliar terrain. We know how to deal with floods and hurricanes here, but ice storms are new for us, and so thank you for all the hard work on that. And also I want to thank my friend April. The Livingston Chamber has been a really good partner over the years. It hasn't been the easiest. You know, you've had one challenge after another and just always overcome and find a way to rise above it all. And it speaks to the type of people you have in this area and the type of leadership you have around you. So I want to thank you all for that as well. And then see my friends Rogers Pope and Buddy Mincy here in the room. I want to also thank them for their service. And look forward to working with them in the upcoming session on some of the issues we're going to talk about today. So with that, I'll give you a little background. I know some of you may know about LABI, but may not. But here's the Cliff Notes version. We're the State Chamber of Commerce. We're the State Manufacturing Association. We do have about 2,200 businesses representing over 300,000 employees that we represent. We have a 100-person board of directors. They're all type A, opinionated people from all different sectors. Big business, small business, North Louisiana, South Louisiana, manufacturing, retail, all this stuff. And so when we get into a room, I like to feel that, you know, I like to tell folks like we're the best thermostat for where the business community is in the state. We get a little bit of every perspective. So when we come out and make a position or make an argument, it's not one little piece of the industry. It's kind of the overall business group. And so that's why I think it's so cool about some of the opportunity we have to work with those folks. And so I want you to be aware of kind of how we come about our positions. And then the other piece is, you know, when I first started there, it's my 8th year leading LABI, and when we first got there, we had kind of an office on the other side of town, which nobody ever went to, and it was tough to get to and all that stuff. We just built a brand new building, downtown Baton Rouge, steps from the Capitol. We like to pride it as being the hangout house for business. It's got conference rooms, it's got offices you can use, it's got more coffee, no offense, than you would ever need. Not as good as the one here, of course. But we want you to come in and be comfortable. So if you're coming to Baton Rouge for a full day of meetings at the Capitol, maybe you got one brief, you know, meeting downtown, you got some time to kill, come on and visit us at 500 Main Street. We'd like to kind of welcome you in, have a cup of coffee, learn about your business, see how things are going, learn from you, you can learn from us, we all get better in the end. So keep that in mind next time you're in Baton Rouge. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the economy and kind of where this is going to happen in the session, because we got sessions starting up in the next month, and since the screen's right behind me and I can't see, I may be doing a little twister a little bit every now and then, but just bear with me. Okay, COVID. It's hard to remember life before this darn thing to a certain extent. You know, but if you kind of peel back the onion and go back, in early last year, coming off the glory of Joe Burrow and all that good stuff, and then bang. It just felt like we had momentum, and then bang. You know, COVID hits, and obviously it changes all of our lives in many ways. And I don't think we fully know the extent. Years from now, there'll be a cool book or Netflix series we're all going to binge watch one day to talk about what the world looks like now after this little thing came into our lives. But let's walk through some of this. I'm going to kind of move around a little bit just so I can kind of see a little bit. You know, how's it changed your business? I mean, look, you all know this better than me. You know, you've had to close. You've lost your customers. Your employees have been working from home. Some of that works well. Sometimes it doesn't work. Your company culture, it's hard to kind of keep it together. You know, especially if you have a team where you're like used to a team and you're trying to lean on each other, and sometimes it's hard to do it. People are hanging out at home. And, oh, by the way, those people at home, they might be having to like educate their children because their children are in school. And there's all kind of uncertainties that businesses have been dealing with. And so the question is not just how do we use a PPP loan to get through this era, but what's waiting on the backside? What's our business look like? Will we get our employees back? Will our customers come back? Will they want the same products, or will they want to do something different? All those questions for business, and it's been a challenging year to sort through all that stuff. What about Louisiana as a whole? Well, this is how it's impacted Louisiana as a whole. You got unemployment very high. You got unemployment benefits being requested more than 60,000 each week. That drains our unemployment trust fund. That is a trust fund that the state of Louisiana had before COVID when Joe Burrow was hosting the Heisman Trophy. We had about $1.2 billion in our unemployment trust fund. It was stable. It was strong as garlic. It was one of the things that we could go around the state and say, look what we have, this unemployment trust fund. It's been drained. It's gone. And the reason why is all those enhanced benefits just drain that fund. Now we got an empty fund. At some point soon, that's going to be refilled by the same businesses trying to struggle to recover after the last year. So that's a big issue we have right there. I've seen and talked to so many businesses around the state. Some have done well. Hey, if you're in the grocery business, God bless you, right? But others have struggled. They've either closed, consolidated, had to think about what the long-term future is, all that good stuff. The PPP loans have come in and kind of created a bridge, but is it a bridge to nowhere or a bridge to somewhere? We're going to find out pretty soon whenever the economy comes back on. So through all of that uncertainty and challenges at the business level and the family level and all that stuff, state budget hadn't cut a dime. And I just tell you that because on Friday, the executive budget is going to be presented in the Capitol, and knowing guys like Buddy and Rogers, there's going to be a whole lot of tough questions that the legislature is going to be asking. They say, hey, look, our people back home have been doing everything to get through this last year and a half. When's the state going to do their part? When's the state budget going to do their part? And so I think those questions are going to come up, and it starts this Friday when the executive budget is presented. And those questions need to be asked because everyone has to do their part to row the boat right now because it is a complicated sea we are sitting on. All right, so what are some of the current pressing issues for the pandemic? What's the issues that right now are bubbling to the top? Well, I mentioned the Unemployment Trust Fund. Right now there's a task force going on. We have representatives, the legislature, the executive branch. We're working with the Workforce Commission, trying to figure out how do we refill, how do we get that $1 billion back without immediately going to business with a $1 billion price tag, because right now those folks are struggling. And so it'll be some version of a delayed assessment on payroll taxes, most likely. It'll be some version of using surplus dollars the state has, and it'll be some version of trying to see if the feds, whenever they, next time they, go to China and borrow a bunch of money and send it down, some of it will maybe go towards refilling these funds. Because remember, these funds did not drain because states were bad actors. These funds did not drain because states didn't do their part. These funds drained because the pandemic shutdown happened and the Fed said everyone needs to get enhanced unemployment. Now you can argue, hey, that's maybe the right policy. That helped get through this, I get it. But that's why it shut down. And so that's why this issue of trying to get some help from the federal assistance for that is critical and timely. Oil and gas industry. So over the last year and a half, people stopped getting on airplanes. People stopped driving around the state. Your family vacation, I bet you've got one or two that got canceled over the last year or so, like everyone else has. People hadn't gone around. Fuel use has gone down. We've lost a lot. We've lost over 10,000 jobs in the oil and gas sector over the last year, and there's probably some more coming, unfortunately. And if you think about it, you put that on top of what the Biden administration just came in, and they said we're going to stop leasing on federal lands and waters. We don't have a lot of federal land. That ain't our issue. Gulf of Mexico, we got a lot out there. Over 94% of Louisiana petroleum that's produced is in offshore water up there. So if you put a hard freeze on federal lands and waters, that includes the Gulf. That pretty much puts us in a very troubling situation for petroleum in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, why does that matter for Louisiana? It's not the big companies. They can go produce somewhere else in the world. Think of all those service companies all throughout South Louisiana. Whether you have a truck, a valve, a supply, groceries, or the little restaurants and caterers and all those retail shops in all these South Louisiana communities that depend on the oil and gas industry producing in the Gulf, all that's going to feel the ripple effect of that issue. So that's a huge issue we're dealing with right now. And then last one is the stimulus. There is another stimulus being talked about in D.C. right now. It's about $1.9 trillion. $1.9 trillion. Look, that's way too high. That is way too high. Now there are some things in there that I think need to happen. Small businesses, if you're still shut down, there needs to be another injection of PPP loans available for those that truly can't make it to get that bridge. That's in there. That's a good thing. But there's a whole lot of other stuff in there that's going to be debated. And so ideally, a more trimmed down version of that bill gets considered pretty soon. But right now, I think DC and talking to our members of Congress up there, they're still feeling everything out. They're trying to feel their colleagues out, how it is working with the new administration. They read the tweets and the press releases, but a lot of those people have not been put into position yet, and so there hasn't been that human-to-human dialogue going yet. So you got a bunch of strangers and Twitterers walking around dealing with each other. There's no people up there yet. And so I think when that happens, maybe they can get some sanity on this, but we'll see what happens on that. But hopefully they do something that really is targeted to especially small business relief and those unemployment trust funds. I think those are the two things that are critical. A lot of the other stuff, that's more political games than anything else, and hopefully they can trim some of that back. Boom. Okay, so with all that glass half empty stuff, it's tempting to sit around in your quarantine house and look outside and see that, right? It's tempting to say, man, this is never going to work. Why we live here? What's the deal? Let's do a life change. Before you go out and buy that convertible or do whatever, just hang on one second. There's actually some pretty cool stuff going on, okay? So So we're going to try to lift the optimism through this speech and kind of get over the last year and a half of bad mojo. Last year when I came here, I don't know if you remember, you probably don't, you got a lot of things going on, but we talked about a 4-quarter game. We said this term is going to be a 4-quarter game. You can't do everything in 1 year and fix Louisiana, but if you take a 4-quarter game, you can do it. And last year we talked about legal reform. And I went around the state talking about legal reform, and everyone in the crowd said, hey, great speech. That'll never happen. Hey, good talk. Don't waste your time. We heard that all around the state last year. Well, actually, the legislature stepped up and passed some pretty cool laws last year. And when they fully go into effect, you're going to really be surprised at what they do. It's going to reduce the amount of lawsuits. It's going to help lower your car insurance rates and bring in competitive insurance providers here. It's going to happen. And all along the way, we also, when COVID hit, we put in some other liability protections, legal reforms for small business, so you didn't get caught in a lawsuit trap when you had to convert your floor plan and go out and serve people in case the virus got transmitted. You didn't get caught in a lawsuit trap. So the legislature actually did some pretty aggressive legal reforms last year. And it's helping us right now. In fact, we're on this panel with other state chamber CEOs, and they look for us. They look to Louisiana as a model for some of the COVID-19 legal reforms that were passed in that last legislature. So some pretty cool things happened in our first quarter that we can build off of. So now it's second quarter time. So which one is it? This is the second quarter. We think it's going to be focused on tax reform, infrastructure, and redistricting. So let's talk about these, and then real quickly, let me talk about third quarter. I mentioned education and workforce there. Let me tell you why that's going to be so critical next year. Not that it's not always critical. It always is. But this is the year where all those kids that have been sitting at home, falling behind in school, I don't care whether you're a kindergartner or you're a senior looking forward to college. You take a year off at that developmental age, it puts you behind. And so when testing happens this year, and next year we get the results of that back, and we see how big the hole is, I think next year we have to confront some pretty aggressive remediation tactics to kind of get kids back up in line. Because if you don't, that bubble in the pipeline, those kindergartners, those third graders, those seventh graders that are behind, we're going to watch that bubble for the next decade and a half go through our system. And we can't afford to do that. We owe those kids more than that. And so next year is going to be a deal where I think education is going to be the third quarter game. But let's talk about this second quarter. Okay, so why is this year the year for tax reform? Well, first of all, after COVID-19, look, any relief for businesses, for small business, especially for working families, we got to look at it this year. Also, the feds. The feds, let's be honest, I think the Biden administration, I'd be shocked if they don't try to push some tax increase this year. So if you know you got more tax increases coming at the federal level, you better start figuring out how you can make some tax relief come at the state level to come offset some of that. The other piece is, if we look to our left and right, we're going to talk about our left and right in a second. Neighboring states are doing right now, trying to make their tax codes more competitive. They want to get every job they can in this catch-up economy. We got to stay up with them. And the Constitution says it's the year, because in Louisiana you have alternating fiscal and non-fiscal sessions. This is a fiscal year. If you're going to do something good on tax reform, it's this year, because 2 years from now, when the next time we have a fiscal session, that's an election year. Hard to do much of anything election year because there's too much high-stakes public going around the Capitol. So that's why this year I think you're going to see this. So let's take a look at Louisiana's tax code in general. We're 42nd in the country. It's not good. It's like golf. You want a low score. So we're 42nd in the country. We're bottom 10. And so that's a lot of things that go into that. But basically you look, if you look at where we are, in the South, we're pretty low. We're one of the worst in the South as far as the competitiveness of our tax code. When we go out and try to bring in companies to look at Louisiana, we hear this all the time. Why is that? Why is our tax code like that? Well, there's a couple of big categories. First of all, centralized sales tax collection. We'll talk about this in more detail in a second, but if you're a small business, if you're a retailer, if you're involved in any business where you have sales in multiple parishes in Louisiana, it's very complicated how you pay your sales taxes. I'm not talking about the amount of tax. I'm talking about how you have to do it. Very complicated. Many people in Louisiana feel like that's just the way it is. That's the way everyone does it, right? No. This is not the way everyone does it. The rest of the country has a rational, sane, normal collection process. We've got this kabuki dance here on sales tax collection. We're going to talk about the kabuki dance in a second. We also have the highest corporate and personal income tax rates in the South when you compare us to the people we're fighting with. And we have something called franchise and inventory taxes. We'll talk about those in a second. A franchise tax is nothing more than like a cover charge for a bar. You want to go into the bar, pay your bill, and go in and buy your drinks. In Louisiana, we have a cover charge to be a business. Doesn't matter whether you make money or lose money. Doesn't matter whether you're growing or shrinking. Cover charge, pay your bill. That's stupid. There should be a cover charge just to be a business in Louisiana. Other states don't have it, we gotta get rid of ours. And inventory taxes. In Louisiana, you have to pay a tax just to have inventory. So imagine if you're a business the last year or so. You've got a bunch of inventory, and all of a sudden the pandemic shuts down your customer base. People aren't coming in. You can't even open your doors, much less have a customer walk in. You're looking at that shelf behind you, you see all that inventory, and all you're thinking about is like, I'm gonna have to pay a tax on all that stuff just because it's sitting there on the shelf. They won't even let me have a customer come in and buy it. It's ridiculous. And so that tax also is something we're gonna take a look at this year. All right, let's get granular with who we're competing against. We compete against Texas, right? That's Big Brother. That's who every time we say, all right, if we're gonna do the right thing, how are we with Texas? These are the comparisons. Texas doesn't even have an income tax. Ours is 6% at the top rate on the personal side. They don't even have a corporate income tax. Ours is 8% on the top rate. No franchise tax. They have an inventory tax, but it's very easy to get it credited and ignored over there. So it doesn't really work on paper. And then they have centralized collection. That's Texas. But you're sitting there saying like, oh, man, you can't compare us to Texas. They're big. They're everything. That's not a fair comparison. We're not as good as they are. Come on, give us a realistic comparison. Ugh. How about Little Brother? How about Mississippi? How about the state that's always the butt of the jokes? I mean, how many times have you said like, oh, look, I know we got problems, but we're not Mississippi. We're better than those guys, right? We're not. We're worse than them. We're worse than them in every category on the tax front. And we got Little Brother kicking our butts right now. Little Brother, they got a lower income tax rate. Little Brother, lower corporate tax rate. Little Brother, they're phasing out their franchise tax. They just passed a law doing that. Little Brother has a lower severance tax on oil and gas. Little Brother has a centralized sales tax collection. And if you, on the way home, Google Mississippi legislature right now you will find one article after another. They're in their session right now. And they are battling, and they just passed a bill out of committee yesterday to phase out their income tax over a multi-year period. Little Brother's going to war, guys. It ain't just Big Brother to the west, it's Little Brother to the east trying to take a shot at us. We got to up our game and realize we're in a battle right now. So this is how you should care. It's more cost for you. It's complicated dealing with it here. You got to hire an army of accountants and lawyers and all these other people to deal with all these exemptions and credits and all that stuff. And no offense to the accountants and lawyers in the room, there'll be plenty of work for you after this is done if we clean this up. But at the end of the day, if we're going to try to recover from the pandemic, recover from the Biden issues with oil and gas, recover from everything else we're facing as a state, if we're going to try to be competitive, we got to get our tax code in line, and there's no better time than now in the session coming up. So these are some of the issues I've talked about, and these are some of the issues that are going to be bouncing around the Capitol in the next couple of months. And what's really cool is a lot of times over the years, if you go back several decades, these issues have always been talked about. And usually it's yap dogs like me going to the Capitol, talking about this, and the legislature saying, yeah, I hear you one day, all right. This year it's the legislature talking about this. Speaker of the House, Clay Snyder, Senate President, Paige Cortez, this is their focus. This is where they're giving their speeches. This is what they want to do. Ways and Means Chair, Stuart Bishop, Reverend Fish Chair, Brett Allen on the Senate side. This is their focus. These are the bills they're drafting. These are the meetings they're having. This is what they want to do. The legislature, House and Senate, coming to us saying, we want to get this done. We want to make this an effort. How do we work this? That's different, guys. That doesn't usually happen in the Capitol. So there is optimism on this stuff. So let's talk a little bit on each one. Centralized sales tax collection. This is the creme de la creme. This is the holy grail right here. I'm just going to tell y'all right now. In Louisiana, if you're a small business and you've got customers in multiple states, you've got to pay that tax collector in each parish. It's crazy. In fact, I'll give you an example. My wife has an online retail business. She sells stuff. And I don't want to self-promote, you know. You can Google it if you want to figure that out. She sells stuff. Some parishes, she knows she has to file every month because they have a form they use. Some parishes, if you don't file because you didn't have any sales there, they're going to assume you had a sale and you didn't file. So they're going to assess you, and then you have to challenge them. And if you win the challenge in timely, then you can get out of it. If you don't, you got to pay and try to get a refund. That's one parish. And so if you got 64 of those bad boys, and you're a small business just trying to figure this out, it's impossible. It really is. And there's no rationale for it. And so what you have right now is last year, the Speaker of the House, Clay Snyder, tried to pass a constitutional amendment saying enough of this. We're going to a centralized collector. Small business pays one person gets all the taxes for the entire state. That person divvies it up to all the local parishes. Every other state does it. It's easy. If you can buy a movie ticket and do everything else on your phone, why can't you do this and just distribute all that down? It's not an issue. It's not a real issue. What local government did, they came to the speaker last year and said, hold on. Let's have a task force and talk about this first. Okay, let's do it. So we had a task force in the off season. Spent like 1 million hours doing hearings that were live streamed over the internet. I'm sure you all watched all of them. If you remember on the 4th hearing, about 7 hours into it, do you remember this moment? Y'all remember this moment? Okay, so we had all these hearings and basically passed a position out of the task force saying we should do this, we should pass the constitutional amendment, we should come out of the dark ages into the current time. So there's already precedence with the task force. So we're going to go and bring this year. If you do this, it will take away the audit trap for these businesses. Because all these parishes, it's not just different collection schemes, it's also different assessments, different audit teams. If you're a small business, you can get audited by multiple different parishes that aren't talking to each other. I mean, it's literally ridiculous. But over the years, a couple of pockets of local governments have done pretty well on this. And so that money comes out of all of you paying auditors and lawyers and compliance fees. That's where that money comes from. And so if we clean this up, a centralized collector, we think it will absolutely lower the cost of business and it'll make us more competitive. This is the biggest deal we'll be working on. This is the one we'll be putting all of our ammo behind. We'll be sending out a lot of stuff on this. Please read, listen, weigh in if you think it's important. This is the time this is actually going to happen. Income taxes. So we have personal income taxes and corporate income taxes. At the corporate side, our highest rate is 8%. On the personal side, our highest rate is 6%. Now, it's interesting, when people hear personal income tax, they think just families. And I get it, that's the bulk of it. But a lot of small businesses pay their business taxes through the personal income tax code. That's pass-throughs. It's just the normal way we do taxes these days. So from our position, personal income tax reductions are just as helpful, if not even more, than corporate income tax reductions. Because if you think about what the Louisiana true small business independent company is, a lot of them are paying through the personal income tax code. That's Louisiana. So if you cut personal income taxes, hey man, that helps business and people at the same time. So the biggest deduction, there's a lot of exemptions and credits in Louisiana. The biggest deduction you hear about is called the FIT, the Federal Income Tax Deduction. And so what that means is when you all pay your federal taxes, you can deduct that from your state taxes. Pretty rare, not many states have it. One issue that's going to come up that we think is a good idea is to remove that exemption. Take that $870 million and then lower rates accordingly. So it just becomes a more flatter, fairer tax. You're still going to have the same benefit. You're just not going to pay more, get the deduction, pay less. It's going to lower the rate for everyone. And so that way when companies look at Louisiana, they're going to see that lower rate. They say, oh, maybe we can go invest there. They have a reasonable tax code. Because right now, people see the high tax code and don't realize once you play the exemption game, it can go lower. So it's going to flatten and fair out that amount. We can drop that rate. It depends on how they do it. You can drop it a couple points. You know, you can bring that 6% income tax rate maybe down to 4. That business maybe down to 6. That's a big deal. And there's some other things as well. You may see credits like the movie credit. You may see credits like other credits on a host of things being looked at to bring down that rate even more. That debate's going to happen. So if you have a thought or position, we'll read on that. Now's the time to engage. But I think that FIT is the likely one to help lower rates on the personal side, make us more competitive. Franchise and inventory. I mentioned the cover charge before. It's about $146 million in cover charges, you know, that we pay every single year. I think there's going to be an effort to phase that out, especially coming from the Senate side. And I think it needs to happen if we're going to compete with Mississippi and Texas. And those national groups that rate taxes, Tax Foundation, all that stuff, this is the one that drives them crazy, the franchise tax. Because a couple of the big guys pay it, but a lot of smaller guys pay it. Last year, the legislature did a pretty good job of phasing out the franchise, or at least suspending the franchise tax for some of the smaller businesses. That was a big deal. We were trying to make that permanent and expand it this year. Severance tax. I mentioned that the attack on oil and gas from the federal side and from the reduced economy. Our severance tax, it doesn't compare very well to our neighboring states. You know, you look at Mississippi, you look at Texas, obviously we're out of whack there. If those federal waters can continue to be put off limits by the Biden administration, we've got to do whatever we can to attract producers back to our onshore development. I'll be honest with you, they have left. Over the years, onshore has gone because they've been sued out of existence. And so people said, heck with that. And so if we can lower the rate and bring them on shore because of what Biden's doing, we might need to then go in and clean up the legal code also and get some trial lawyers off their back so they can come in and produce without feeling like they're under attack. But the first thing first, we gotta financially make it attractive to come produce here. Those are real jobs, man. Those 10,000 oil and gas jobs we lost, a lot of times you don't need a higher ed degree to do that. You can just go out there and make a really good, strong living. And a lot of that average salary in the oil and gas industry, it's about $23,000 more than other industries. So you can go in, low entry to the workforce, make good money quickly. That's awesome. We need more of that, not less. Severance tax relief this session might help get that done. So there's other issues coming up. Infrastructure. This is going to be controversial, like always. Because everyone knows you need infrastructure, right? We need roads, we need investment. Everyone knows it. And everyone's frustrated with the Department of Transportation kind of wasting money. But there's a couple bills that actually have some pretty good reforms in there. The question is how you pay for it. No one wants to pay for it. Everyone wants the roads for free. I get it, so do I. But there's going to be a debate on a gas tax. There's going to be a debate on basically maybe re-diverting some of the existing sales tax to roads. There's going to be a debate on whether, when sports gaming comes online in Louisiana, whether dedicating a portion of those dollars to roads. As we look at all these exemptions and credits, some of it might be used to lower rates. Maybe some of those savings will go towards roads. There's capital outlay reform we looked at. There's several things that are going to come up in the session with the thought of going into infrastructure. I think our position right now, and we haven't taken a position in the bills yet, but our position right now is one, anything you do has to have the DOTD reforms in it. That agency needs to have a microscope on it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to make sure no dollars being wasted. Second, you got to be very specific what projects you're going to be doing. It can't go to some brother-in-law's, back road to a hunting camp. It's got to go to stuff that we all need to make sure that the economy works. And then third, whatever dollars you put into it, whether it's diverting existing or raising new, it's got to be as efficient as possible because we've got a damaged economy, and you can't do a whole lot without hurting that down. But that debate's coming, so definitely pay attention to that one. Redistricting. Once every 10 years, the United States counts their people. It's called the census. And then they take that count and they give it to the states. And the states take that, and they have to redraw the lines for legislators, Public Service Commission, Bessie members, etc. Judicial court seats as well. And so, I mentioned Buddy Mincy and Rogers Pope here. Their lines are going to be looked at just like every other lines in all of their colleagues. We're going to have a redistricting session probably this fall where they put the numbers on the table and everyone has to redraw all the lines. These things are usually like a political fireball. I mean, it's going to be controversial. It's going to be spicy. If you like watching that type of stuff, it'll be train wreck style television if you want to watch that. But it's important. I don't want to gloss over too much. It's important because you want people to feel like the representatives understand them, that they're matched with people that think like them, that live like them, that they see them in church and all that stuff. So pay attention to that, weigh in. You want to make sure you've got the representation that best fits you. But that'll be high stakes poker this fall. And then judicial modernization. When I mentioned last year in the first quarter, we pushed legal reform. And one of the things we heard from the court system for the last several years was, we can't afford to do any of that stuff you're talking about. And so we've done a deep dive in what they can afford, how they hold their money, where it comes from. There's a lot of interesting data there. And that's going to be coming out this year. And so we're going to try to educate the public on how the courts work, how they're funded, and how maybe there's some ideas to make them run maybe a little more efficiently and ethically, possibly. There's a lot of great people in that branch of government that do great heroic work every single day. I'm not picking on the judiciary. But the legislature's gone above and beyond over the last decade, and they're very transparent in what they do, and they subjected themselves to the ethics code. The executive branch has subjected themselves to the ethics code. Judiciary is not yet. And so I think we either need to have a very accountable judiciary and a very transparent one, and I think there's some ideas we're going to roll out this year to maybe get them there. So I think the window looks like this. Remember that gloomy window early on? Where it's like, oh, COVID, oh, whatever, ice storm. No, man, we got a lot of opportunity. We're going into a fiscal session. The legislature's geared up. They got their ears pinned back, ready to do tax reform. It's the time to do it. Since the feds are dumping Chinese money on us every chance they get, we got money and surpluses to do this right now. That's the time for tax reform. This is what the window should look like. And if you go outside today, it actually does look like that, by coincidence. So it is a Chamber of Commerce day outside. I think it can be this whole year. We take advantage of the second quarter, do the right things on tax reform, and get it done. If you want, as session goes on, you want to be kind of kept up to speed, just text LABI to 66866. What that'll do is put you on a little email list. And during session, you'll get an email. And every day we say, here's what happened, here's what's going to happen tomorrow, here are the issues. If you want to make your voice heard, click here. Very easy. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, you can send us to your junk folder and no one will know. But more information is better than less information. Don't be scared to do this, and you just need to know what's going on, because there's a lot of potential for great things to happen in the session this year. And I'm telling you, the way it happens is when guys like Buddy and Rogers hear from real people back home. They hear from the dudes like us all the time. When the real people talk, man, that's like a secret gold right there. So please weigh in with them through that. These are how you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. We put a lot of this information out throughout session. Again, good way to stay educated and informed. And look, some of the stuff you may agree with, some of the stuff you may read and say, I don't agree with that. That's fine. Remember I mentioned that 100-person board of type A people? Trust me, we have all kinds of disagreements in there, but when we march, it's the collective information there. And, you know, I hope you consider being a LABI member if you're not. We represent businesses of all shapes and sizes. We'd love for you to join. We are a membership organization, and we do lots of cool stuff. And so if you want to join, you can be involved in our deliberation process. You can vote on our issues. You can hang out at our cool new house. You can come to our parties. It's a fun place to be. So if you want to join us, we'd love to have you. We can talk more about that. So with that, I will stop right there. Thank you all for your time and attention.